Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of a fortnightly IRENA Insights webinar series. My name is Karan Kocher, and I'm joining from the IRENA Innovation and Technology Center in Bonn, Germany. For those of you who are joining for the first time, I would like to introduce you to IRENA and to our webinar series. IRENA is an intergovernmental organization with currently 168 member countries and another 16 in the accession process. We support countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future and serve as the principal platform for international cooperation, a center of excellence, and a repository of policy, technology, and financial knowledge on renewable energy. And because our analytical work and our engagement with our members generate a lot of valuable insights, we are constantly looking for more ways to share those insights with you. And that's why we launched this webinar series, which we run every other week, usually on Tuesdays. We started in January 2020 before the pandemic proliferated many virtual events. And so far, we have organized over 40 webinars on various topics. You can check them all on our IRENA events website, and the link to that will be provided in the presentation slides. We appreciate that there are many longer deep dive webinars out there, but what we try to do here on the contrary is to keep these webinars short. So they last approximately 30 minutes, which means we cannot clearly cover everything. But the idea is to give you enough to decide whether you want to actually delve deeper into the topic. And we signpost in our presentations further resources for more in-depth information to help you do that. So today, while you enjoy your coffee, tea, or bagel, in the next 30 minutes, I'm very excited to say that we'll hear from Jack Kirija, who leads IRENA's work on geothermal energy. This topic has been covered extensively and deserves much more attention. And I'm very happy to say that we'll hear Jack's key takeaway from the recent IRENA report called Powering Agri-Value Chains with Geothermal Energy, a Guide for Policymakers. Before I hand the microphone to Jack, I will just briefly announce some housekeeping rules, which you are certainly aware from other online events. We are recording this webinar and we will post the recordings and slides on the IRENA events website within 48 hours. You are on mute. If you have any questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A functions. And without any further ado, let me welcome Jack. Welcome, Jack, to our IRENA Insights webinar series. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We are thrilled to hear more on the topic of geothermal energy in agri-food systems. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karan, for the introduction. So today I'm going to be talking about this a very interesting topic about powering agri-food value chains with geothermal heat. And this topic is based on a guidebook for policymakers that was developed by IRENA together with its partners in May this year. The partners of IRENA who are involved in the development of this work have done it in the framework of the Global Geothermal Alliance, which is a multi-stakeholder platform for enhancing dialogue, cooperation, and coordinated action in order to foster geothermal deployment for both power generation as well as geothermal heating and cooling applications. So what motivated this work is really the need to establish sustainable food systems through the use of renewable energy. And clearly there's a very clear nexus between the use of renewable energies and advancement or enhancement of the agri-food systems, whereby the renewables can be used to enhance food production, to support processing of food, and also support preservation of food through drying, dehydration, and storage. And one of the things that we are seeing is that the population of the world is continuing to grow and is projected to reach to about 10 billion by the year 2050. Of course, this is going to put a pressure on the food systems as well as the existing water systems. So the demand for food and water is going to increase as the population increases. And we need to start thinking of ways of how this population growth can be sustained through the food systems. And currently, unfortunately, fossil fuels are mainly being used to enhance our food production. And at the same time, they are contributing to emissions, which account for about 30% of all the emissions that come from the agri-food systems. However, when we come to renewable energies and specifically geothermal energy, then we find that it has applications across the entire value chain of food chain. And geothermal is a truly unique resource in that it not only provides electricity, which can be used in these agri-food systems, but also provides heat as well as other byproducts, which can support the agri-food systems. For example, when you look at the primary production stage, we have the geothermal waters, which are currently being used in some cases for irrigation. We also have a geothermal heat, which is being used to create an optimal environment for the growth of crops in greenhouses, as well as an optimal environment for aquaculture. Then we also have other byproducts from geothermal, such as the hydrogen sulfide, which can be used for the manufacture of fertilizers, and some bit of carbon dioxide, which can be used to enhance photosynthesis in the greenhouses. In the other value chain, which is a post-harvest and storage, geothermal heat is being used for drying of crops and cereals and dehydration of fruits and vegetables, while at the same time, the electricity as well as the heat can be used in the cold storage and refrigeration processes. When you look at the processing of the food products, then again, we see geothermal heat being used to provide the process heat that's required for processes such as evaporation, such as sterilization, among others, in order to improve the shelf life of food. Now, the other thing about geothermal is that it's available across a wide range of temperatures, starting from very low temperatures, below 50 degrees, which can be used in the aquaculture industry for the growth of fish, and also for warming of the soil for planting crops. Then we have this temperature range between 50 degrees and 100 degrees, which are suitable for heating of the greenhouses, for drying of cereals, as well as for the pasteurization of milk. And we have the higher temperatures above 100 degrees, which are being used for cold storage, as well as for other processes that require higher temperatures, such as food canning. Now, when we look at the trends in the geothermal sector, particularly when you look at the agri-food value chains, we see that over the last 10 years, that's the period between 2010 and 2020, there's been a 63% increase in the use of geothermal in the agri-food system. And this has mainly been driven by the use of geothermal for greenhouses, which has increased by about 25% over that 10-year period. The use of geothermal in aquaculture, this for growing of fish and other aquatic organisms, this has increased by about 36%, as well as the use of geothermal in the drying of agricultural produce. Again, this has increased by about 60%. Now, one thing that I'd also like to point out is that as much as these percentages look quite high, then you also have to recognize that it's coming from quite a low base. But the important thing is that there has been a consistent growth over the years, and we all seek to build on this growth in order to have more use of geothermal in these agri-food value chains. And when we look around the world beyond these three main applications, then we see other kind of opportunities that in the agri-food sector that are using geothermal energy. One of them is the dehydration of fruits in Mexico. This is a project that started as a demonstration project a few years ago, and it has evolved to the point where it has now become a commercial project that is not only providing profits for the company, but also employment for the local communities. In El Salvador, they also have a project, a pilot project, where they are using geothermal to process honey. And this is a project that has been developed by the geothermal developer in that country in order to be able to support the local communities so that they can benefit from the geothermal resources that are located around their homesteads. In Turkey, they have also been using geothermal for large-scale greenhouse production, mainly to grow tomatoes for domestic use as well as for export. In New Zealand, they are processing milk and producing milk powder using geothermal heat from a nearby geothermal resource. And this is a project that is run by the local community. So all the profits from this project go to the local community. And the milk that they're producing is not only used at home, but also exported to other countries. Then we have also in Kenya, where they have developed a pilot project for aquaculture, among other pilot projects. And the hope is that these pilot projects can eventually grow into commercial projects. So at IRENA, what we've been doing is that we've been looking at the various case studies from the world, and we are trying to support these initiatives by different countries in order to have more of this kind of applications be developed. And what we are doing is that we are analyzing the different case studies from around the world, collecting the best practices that have enabled those projects to become successful, and trying to come up with some recommendations that we believe they can be adopted in other countries in order to have the same success replicated elsewhere. And in these recommendations, they are contained in what we are calling the Guidebook for Policymakers on Powering Agri-food Value Chains. And as I said at the beginning, this is a report that was published in May this year. Now, some of the recommendations that have been put forward in this guidebook include the establishment of enabling policies and frameworks to support the development of these kind of projects. It also involves data collection, both on the geothermal resource side, as well as on the demand side for the utilization of the heat. It also looks at how to align the policies across the different sectors that require the geothermal heat, as well as creating coordination among the various stakeholders who are involved. It also considers the financing, which you know is an important aspect for creating successful geothermal projects. And it also looks into how to de-risk geothermal projects so that we can be able to develop such kind of initiatives. We also have a look at the need to build capacity, as well as to create awareness so that we can be able to overcome the technical barriers that are involved in these projects. So for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to go into a little detail about each of these recommendations, just to see what's happening in different places. So with regard to the resource mapping and demand mapping, so this is more about collecting data about the geothermal resource. So where do the resources occur? What are the temperatures, and at what depth do these geothermal resources occur? At the same time, we also look at the demand for this geothermal heat. One thing that you have to realize is that when it comes to heating, you cannot economically transport the heat over very long distances. So you need to use it as close as possible to where the heat is produced. So so that means that it's very important for us to be able to identify the heat demand that is very close to the geothermal resource. And the two approaches are being used to do this. One of them is what we're calling the resource push. And in the resource push, we are trying to see which industries or which agri-food enterprises are close to the geothermal resource, and then encouraging them to use that resource for their operations. The other approach is what we're calling the industry pool, whereby we have a geothermal resource, but we do not have any agri-food applications close by that can use this heat. And in this case, we try to put measures in place to attract them so that they can come and establish the operations close to the geothermal resource and be able to use it. And one of the ways that countries are going about this is through the use of interactive GIS maps that are showing the collocation between the geothermal resources and the demand. And that's what you can see on the chart on the figure on the left, as the case in New Zealand. And different countries are trying to come up with similar tools. For example, in the Danube region, in Hungary, where they are developing this kind of maps, as well as in the Netherlands and Switzerland. Now, when it comes to the enabling policies and regulatory frameworks, it's very important that, first of all, to look at the regulations on how to use geothermal resources. Usually, these are resources that are owned by the government, but at the same time, they occur in private land, or sometimes in public land, or in community land. So one aspect that should be made very clear from the beginning is how do the investors get access to that resource? And the second thing is, how do they get the permission to use that resource and for how long? Because this helps them to create a certainty over the investments. And when it comes to the agri-food application, it's very important that these processes be simplified so that the investors do not spend a lot of time trying to get the necessary approvals. And for example, in France, what they do is that for those projects that are less than 2 megawatts, that require temperatures of below 100 degrees, and that require drilling to a depth not exceeding about 200 meters. So for this one, they do not have to go through very rigorous licensing procedures. All they need to do is register the project, and then they can begin the operations. Apart from regulations, then there's also a number of policy instruments that the countries need to put place in order to support the use of geothermal in agri-food. One of them is to introduce heat tariffs. And this heat tariff should be acceptable to both the energy developer as well as to the users. Then we have the tax incentives, which can be put in place in order to help bring down the cost of setting up the agri-food applications, as well as reduce the cost of operating those applications over a long period of time. We also have some subsidy schemes that have been introduced in countries like the Netherlands, whereby they help to bring down the cost of the tariff to a similar level as an alternative fuel that is being used as a benchmark. And in most cases, that is the natural gas. And then another very important thing when it comes to geothermal is the need to do risk mitigation. And what has been happening traditionally is that many countries have been using public funds to as a way of mitigating the risk, the geological risk associated with geothermal projects, such that when you drill a project and it turns out to be unsuccessful, then you get compensated for the loss that, for the financial loss that you've made. Now, what we're seeing more and more is that as geothermal markets continue to advance, those countries that are moved are quite advanced in their geothermal markets, and those that have a large portfolio of geothermal projects, instead of using the public funds for risk mitigation, they are using an insurance-based risk mitigation, whereby each project contributes to a kitty. And in case they encounter a project that is unsuccessful, then they get compensated from that kitty, which is insurance-based. Now, the aspect that we're also promoting is a cross-sectoral alignment and coordination. And one thing that you notice is that when it comes to geothermal using the agri-food sector, you find that the energy, the geothermal itself is an energy that is being produced by, say, a geothermal developer whose main function is in the energy sector. But when it comes to the utilization of the heat, then these the people in the energy sector are not the ones utilizing, but they need people from other sectors like the agriculture sector, the industrial sector, to be able to utilize that heat. And unless the policies in these two sectors are aligned, then it becomes very difficult to use that energy. And what we're seeing in some countries is that they are developing what they are calling some special economic zones, whereby they identify areas with a competitive advantage. For example, areas with a geothermal resource, they tend to have a competitive advantage in the sense that there's availability of clean and affordable energy. And then they tend to create a link between this energy and industrial development, so that they now put the industries around these geothermal areas. Another thing that has also been found to work is whereby countries are trying to align their local development plans with their national development plans. For example, in New Zealand, they are encouraging development to take place at the local level and to be driven more and more at the local level than coming from the national government. And the government has been providing support to those projects that can demonstrate that the projects that they are doing are going to benefit the local communities more, as opposed to, for example, the power projects. Instead of feeding the power to the grid, if they demonstrate that these projects are going to create value for the local economy, then they get support for that. And what has been happening is that some of the districts in New Zealand also happen to have geothermal resources. And they have been using that to their advantage, whereby they are showing that this geothermal resource that we have, we can develop it for the benefit of the local communities. And some of these developments that they do are in the agri-food sector. And one of the tools that has successfully been used to do this is the geothermal heat master plans, or the sector roadmaps, which are basically documents that provide a direction to the heating sector by identifying targets that the country hopes to achieve within a certain period. They also identify the opportunities for utilizing geothermal in the agri-food sector, as well as the challenges, and also identifies the policy measures and financial instruments that can be used to advance geothermal development. Apart from that, we also notice that the use of geothermal in the agri-food sector is something that involves a lot of stakeholders, and these stakeholders usually have different interests, but it's always important to have a coordination, a way of coordinating these stakeholders so that each of them can be able to play their rightful role. For example, the geothermal developer can concentrate on the development of the resource, while the businesses can concentrate on the utilization. So, and these master plans are also very critical in creating this kind of a coordination across the different sectors. Another important thing that also is being done to facilitate the development of agri-food and the use of geothermal in the agri-food sectors is looking at how the businesses are set up. So there are those businesses that are set up as standalone. There are those others that are set up as cascade systems, whereby you have more than one business, but then they are both utilizing energy from one stream. And then we also have those that are being integrated together with the electricity projects. And the importance of this kind of integration is that it enables the sharing of costs among the different businesses, and that helps to lower the risk involved in these businesses. It also promotes what you're calling the increase in the socioeconomic impacts, because if you have more businesses that are based on one resource, then you tend to have more benefits coming to the communities living in those areas. And one of the things that this is doing is that it's promoting financing and making it easy for businesses to be able to attract financing. Now, it's also important for business to look into the feasibility studies, because these ones help to establish the socioeconomic impacts of the project and help them also in the attracting of the financing that is very much needed for them to advance their businesses. Now, the other thing is that it's also important to bring in the local banks into the financing of these direct use projects. And a case in study is in Turkey, whereby the local banks have been sensitized about the needs of the businesses that are using geothermal energy. And they have been able to structure the financing that they offer these businesses so that it suits the needs of the businesses, and this has attracted financing to support the agri-food ventures. Now, when it comes to knowledge gaps, so this is one of the main barriers that has been hindering the use of geothermal in the agri-food sector, because many people are not aware of the benefits, as well as they're not aware of the opportunities that exist for geothermal applications in the agri-food sector. And one of the ways that this gap is being addressed is through the development of pilot projects, because they help to identify the technical viability of these ventures, and to also some extent they can also be used to demonstrate the commercial viability. Another thing is that for places where these projects are new, it's a way of also helping the people to prove the concept of the use of geothermal in the agri-food sector. And this is something that we are seeing more and more in different countries, for example, in East Africa, in Kenya, as well as in Latin America. Another aspect also that is being developed in order to address the knowledge gap is a capacity building, whereby the skills of the people involved in the development of these direct user projects is being built through academic institutions that provide certifications either at the diploma or degree level. And there are many institutions that are currently doing this across the world. Now, for the new geothermal markets, whereby the use of geothermal in the agri-food sector is not a very common thing, then we have more elaborate capacity building and technical assistance programs. And these are run by either international organizations, and they aim to support those countries to establish enabling frameworks that would enable them to overcome any existing barriers that will make them be able to use the geothermal in the agri-food sector more in a better way. And when you look around the world, we see a number of these. For example, in Central America, where GIZ is involved in the technical assistance, we have the geothermal training program in Iceland that has been offering postgraduate certificates on different aspects of geothermal use, including on the agri-food sector. We have the Autonomous University of Mexico. This is a research group that has been involved in the development of the demonstration projects in that country. The Fraunhofer Institute of Energy and Infrastructure. This is a think tank that has been supporting projects in Latin America to carry out feasibility studies and also to develop demonstration projects. So we are seeing more and more of this coming up in different parts of the world. Now, another aspect is with regard to leveraging technology and sustainability and innovation in order to support use of geothermal in the agri-food sector. And when it comes to these, we are seeing some concepts that are being introduced, such as a society without waste, whereby they are looking into using all the materials and all energy from the geothermal resource for various applications. And of course, agri-food applications is one of those uses. So in this case, we tend to see a collocation of the geothermal power plant with many agri-food applications, so that the energy that remains from the power generation cycle is used to drive the agri-food application. And what this does is that it drives efficiency in the utilization of the energy. But at the same time, because we have many industries that are located close to each other, we see that what comes out as a waste product from one of the industries is used as a raw material for the next industry. And by doing this, they tend to eliminate wastes, and they also tend to encourage a lot of innovation. And more and more, we're also seeing incubation centers being developed around the geothermal sites. For example, one of the projects that is currently being done in a number of countries is using geothermal for the production of algae. So where algae uses the heat from the geothermal resource as to encourage its fast growth. And then this algae is also being used as a source of food for animal feeds, as well as for human consumption. Now, in the Netherlands, we're also seeing a case where they're developing a demonstration project called the Geofood. This is a project between the Netherlands, Iceland, and Slovakia that looks into establishing a circular economy between the horticultural industry and the aquaculture industry. So this kind of innovations, of course, they are encouraging the use of the development of geothermal and also its application in the agri-food sector. So apart from these recommendations, we also analyze a couple of tools that have been shown to support the use of geothermal in the agri-food sector. And one of these tools is the geothermal heating tariffs. So the essence of the tariff is to ensure that the energy producer is able to run a business that is sustainable, so they're able to meet all the operating costs and make some profit to enable them expand the business further. And when it comes to the heating tariff, there are two approaches that are currently being used. One of them is a cost-based approach, where the objective is to meet all the costs associated with running the business and having a small markup that they can use to expand the business. But at the same time, we need to strike a balance so that this markup is not too much that it discourages investment. Now, the second approach is called a market-based approach, whereby the tariff is based on a benchmark alternative source of energy. And in most cases, countries are using gas as the benchmark. So when they're setting the tariff for geothermal, they want to ensure that the geothermal tariff is at least at the same level as the benchmark, or at least lower, so that it can be able to compete. But in case where that is not possible, then we see countries introducing measures such as subsidies to ensure that geothermal is at the same level as the benchmark. And finally, the other tool that is also being considered by different people is the assessment of the socioeconomic impacts of developing geothermal agri-food application. So this one, we see it as a tool that can encourage governments to invest in these projects. And this involves the identification of a number of indicators that are measurable and quantifiable. And then for each of those indicators, then we want to see whether it's bringing a positive or a negative impact on the local community. Now, in most cases, the impacts tend to be positive, and this can be able to be used as a way of supporting, of encouraging government to support this kind of projects, because they have a direct correlation with improving the welfare and the standards of the people who live around the geothermal sites. So that's it for now, and I welcome any questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. You certainly covered a lot in your presentation. Unfortunately, our 30 minutes is coming to a close and we do not have time for questions, but I would recommend, I would encourage our audience to send in their questions at the email ID at the bottom of the slide, and we'll be happy to give you a response on that. I would like to thank Jack for your time and sharing with us your knowledge and your experience, as well as laying out the challenges ahead. And I would like to thank the audience for joining in today and listening. We hope that you learned something new. As far as the Insight series is concerned, in 2 weeks, we'll have another webinar on jobs and skills, and which is followed by a webinar on gender. The registration will open soon, and we look forward to seeing you soon. So that's all from us today. I wish you a good rest of the day. Goodbye, and see you soon.